The overwhelming majority of Americans agree. Money in politics is a huge problem. Over 3/4 of Americans want limits on campaign spending, while 2/3 believe that new laws to limit the influence of money on the political process would be effective. But does this mean that money inherently buys the votes of members of Congress? Americans seem to think so by wide margins annually when polled. However, as a professor I've had for some of my political science classes here at college has pointed out, political scientists claim that money does not buy votes. At best, political scientists have not reached a definitive answer regarding the correlation between money donated to members of Congress and their voting records. Given the gaps between the positions of political scientists versus those of the American people, I decided to take the liberty of conducting a content analysis using some of the skills I've learned in my research methods class to determine whether or not money buys votes in Congress. Firstly, we'll be analyzing the Democrats in the Senate who this August voted for and against an amendment introduced by Senator Kevin Cramer, Republican of North Dakota, quote, to prohibit the Council on Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency from promulgating rules or guidance that bans hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, in the United States. The Senate voted down the amendment, with 8 out of 50 Democratic senators voting with the Republicans to kill it. Analyzing how much money every single Democratic senator has taken from the oil and gas industry throughout their careers in the chamber, I found that, on average, those who voted for the amendment took $293,950.25 from the industry, 134% more than how much those opposed took, $125,626.71. Next, I decided to take a look at the House vote in September for the annual National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA. The House Democratic Caucus ultimately supported the bill 181 to 38. This bill includes a $25 billion Pentagon budget increase on top of what President Biden already requested. Naturally, it is almost certain that the military-industrial complex supported this increase. To analyze how campaign contributions from the defense industry may have impacted Congress members' votes on the NDAA, I randomly selected 5% of Democratic representatives from each of the two following groups: those who voted yes and those who voted no. In the yes group, we have Representatives Tony Cardenas of California, Jerry Nadler of New York, Ann Custer of New Hampshire, Jared Huffman of California, Brian Higgins of New York, Kathy Castor of Florida, Kai Kahele of Hawaii, Sanford Bishop of Georgia, and Jim Himes of Connecticut. In the no group, we have Representatives Gwen Moore of Wisconsin and Susan Bonamici of Oregon. On average, the 9 representatives in the yes group have taken $911.11 from the defense industry, while contributions to Moore and Bonamici of the no group average at $116,251.50. The average contribution from the defense industry to a member of the yes group is 15.2% higher than one to a member of the no group. Of course, I'm not the first person to do this type of content analysis. Reporters for Sludge analyzed in July of last year the contributions to the defense industry of House Democrats after an amendment to cut the Pentagon budget by 10% failed overwhelmingly. They found that the industry gave more than three times more to those against the amendment than to those for it. Additionally, UMass professor Thomas Ferguson conducted his own study on money in politics by examining the Democrats in Congress who initially supported Dodd-Frank, Obama's Wall Street regulation bill. Quote, the researchers found that for every $100,000 the financial industry spent on campaign contributions for a House Democrat who voted for Dodd-Frank, they were able to increase the likelihood that same Democrat would vote to dismantle the parts of the bill by 13.9%, according to the study. Democratic representatives who voted in favor of dismantling Dodd-Frank often received $200,000 to $300,000 from the industry, end quote. Despite the results on these analyses appearing to paint the picture of an open and shut case, there are several issues relating to internal validity, or whether manipulation within your experiment has been done correctly. The overarching issue is actually referenced in the aforementioned Sludge article, in which they point out that donations to a candidate from an industry include donations from employees in that industry, which are counted equally with donations from industry executives and or corporate PACs. Given that the latter two types of contributors would be far more likely to want Congress to pass laws favoring their industry than average employees would, it makes sense to be skeptical of the results of these analyses when they include employee contributions. Another notable internal validity issue applies to my analysis of the NDAA vote, and that is a sampling of random representatives from each group. Obviously, the aforementioned averages among the representatives of each group will not hold had I swapped them all with 9 other yes representatives or 2 other no representatives. Also, where both of my analyses differ, at least from the analysis by Sludge, is that they analyzed only campaign contributions from the 2020 election cycle, while mine take into account the contributions from the election cycles throughout the entirety of the representatives' careers. That presents yet another issue with the internal validity of my analysis. Obviously, some members of Congress have been in office longer than others, and thus have had more time to take more money from their respective industries. While these issues with the internal validity of the analyses could cast a shadow of doubt on whether or not they are to be trusted, the result across the board, that those who voted for a certain piece of legislation were more likely to take more money from the industry that would benefit from its passage, cannot be ignored. While the result is consistent with the American public's belief that Congress is only beholden to its big money donors, it does contradict, quite directly, the consensus amongst political scientists that money does not buy votes.